Vanilla was a young woman of 22 who lived in a small English village. The village had old stone houses, narrow streets, and the smell of rain and earth. She worked at the local library every morning, sorting books and helping visitors. One empty piece of land sat forgotten at the end of the main road near her house. Weeds grew tall there, and the ground was hard and cracked and completely gray. Vanilla passed that land every day and saw not what it was, but what it could become. One quiet evening, Vanilla sat at her kitchen table and opened her old brown notebook. She began drawing a garden. Trees, flowers, a small bench, and a winding stone path. She drew for 2 hours without stopping until the page was completely full of detail. Then she looked at her drawing and made a quiet decision deep inside her heart. She would turn that empty, forgotten land into the garden she had just drawn on paper. The next morning, she woke before sunrise and went outside with a small shovel. Vanilla pushed the shovel into the hard ground and began to clear the tall weeds. The work was difficult, and her hands turned red from the sharp, cold morning air. After 1 hour, she had cleared only a small corner of the large and empty land. She stood up straight, looked at what she had done, and smiled quietly to herself. Oliver arrived on his bicycle and stopped when he saw her working alone out there. "What are you doing?" he asked, and she handed him her notebook and let him read. Oliver looked at Vanilla's drawing for a long time without saying a single word. Then he put down his bicycle, rolled up his sleeves, and picked up a second shovel. The next day, Rosie arrived with muddy boots, a wide smile, and a bag full of seeds. "I heard what you are doing," she said, "and I want to be part of this from the very start." The three of them worked every evening after work until the sun went completely down. Slowly, the land began to look less like a forgotten place and more like a real beginning. One Saturday morning, Mr. Henderson came out of his house with a cold expression. He was a tall man with gray hair and a loud voice that carried far down the street. "This land does not belong to you," he said, standing at the edge of what they had cleared. "You are making a mess, and I will speak to the village council about this immediately." Vanilla stood up straight, looked at him calmly, and said, "We are building a garden here." Mr. Henderson shook his head, turned around, and walked back inside without another word. That evening, Vanilla sat alone in her kitchen, feeling the full weight of his cold words. Oliver sent her a message that said, "Do not stop. What you are doing truly matters." Rosie knocked on her door with 2 cups of hot chocolate and her warmest smile. They sat at the kitchen table and talked until the village outside became dark and still. By the time Rosie left, Vanilla felt something steady and strong return inside her chest. She opened her notebook, looked at her drawing, and decided she would not give up. The following week, 2 more neighbors came to complain about the noise and the dirt. They said the land looked far worse than before, and that she was wasting her time. Rosie crossed her arms and said, "This garden will be here long after your complaints are gone." Oliver quietly took photographs of their progress and shared them in the village group online. Within 2 days, 14 people from the village had offered to come and help them work. Vanilla stood in the middle of the growing garden and felt something shift all around her. Weekend after weekend, more people arrived with tools, seeds, and warm flasks of tea. An old woman named Mrs. Ellis brought roses she had grown carefully in her own garden. A young mother came with her small son, who planted his first seed with both tiny hands. Even some of the neighbors who had complained began to slow down and quietly watch. The land was changing. Green was pushing up through the dark and long, tired earth. Vanilla walked through it every evening, touching the new leaves gently with her fingers. Mr. Henderson stood at his window one gray morning, watching the garden grow quietly. He saw Vanilla kneeling in the soft soil, carefully planting a row of small white flowers. He saw Oliver building a low wooden bench carefully beside the stone path they had laid. He saw Rosie laughing as she chased a butterfly through the tall and swaying green grass. He stood there for a long time with both hands behind his back and said nothing at all. Then he put on his coat, picked up his walking stick, and went slowly outside alone. Mr. Henderson walked to the edge of the garden and stopped quietly beside Vanilla. She looked up from the soil with dirt on her hands and waited without saying a word. "I had a garden once," he said, in a voice much softer than she had ever heard from him. "My wife planted it. Every flower, every tree, every stone was her idea and her love. She passed away 3 years ago, and I have not been able to look at gardens since then." Vanilla stood up slowly and said, "Then this garden is for her too, if you will allow it." Mr. Henderson returned the next morning with a box of his wife's old flower bulbs. He knelt down beside Vanilla and planted each one with slow and very careful hands. Oliver built a second bench and placed it in the warmest and sunniest corner of the garden. Rosie found a wooden sign and painted it carefully in green, "The Village Garden." People began coming in the evenings just to sit together and breathe the quiet air there. The garden was no longer only Vanilla's dream. It now belonged to every single person. On the last warm evening of summer, the garden was full of color, sound, and soft light. Roses climbed the old stone wall, and the trees Vanilla had planted gave cool, gentle shade. Children ran laughing along the stone path that Oliver had helped build, stone by stone. Mr. Henderson sat on his bench in the sunny corner, holding a warm cup of tea quietly. Rosie took a photograph of Vanilla, standing in the middle of everything, smiling softly. Vanilla closed her eyes, took a long, deep breath, and whispered, "This is exactly what I saw." And so the empty land became a garden. And the garden became a place for everyone. Vanilla had a dream. She did not wait. She did not ask for permission. She simply began. And little by little, the world around her changed. Thank you for watching Slow English Stories. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. We will see you in the next story.